Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartofilis.
Hey, Coach Love, what's going on?
Not much. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to talk to you about all the ins and outs of whether it's your work as a shooting coach and all the high-level guys you've worked with. So really excited to talk to you today.
I appreciate it. Didn't know. I'm excited with COVID and everything going on, and I live with my wife and then two daughters. It's always nice to get a chance to talk to another guy because that's in short demand for me right now. So thank you.
Top of that, you get to talk about hoops, which we both love doing that. So really quickly, if you could take us back to the start. I read a little bit about your high school career and how you always spoke about how you weren't a standout player, a good shooter, but you had a mentor that kind of helped you get out and kind of embrace the love of basketball that you have now. Can you touch on that whole story a little bit for us?
Yeah, I grew up and still live in Calgary, Canada, which is a city of about 1 million people. I think it was about 700,000 or 800,000 back then, but not on the basketball map. And I just loved the game and always felt like I was a good shooter, but I knew I wasn't a very good player. Like I wasn't going to play beyond high school. And I was lucky enough kind of around that late middle school, junior high into high school age where I was a ball boy for a minor league team in my hometown. And one of the players was a fellow by the name of Chip England. And Chip is now the shooting coach in San Antonio. And in my opinion, he's the best shooting coach in the world, and it's not close. He's lapping the field. And I was lucky enough that I got to meet him when I was 13 and got to know him and become friends with him as much as a 13-year-old and a 28-year-old can. I guess big brother and little brother would be a better description of our relationship. And now we're 45 years old. I'm 45, and I won't mention Chip's age, but he's been instrumental in helping me kind of grow my career from an average player at best to getting into coaching, to just getting better at my craft of coaching and giving advice on what steps to take along the way.
That's awesome. And it's great to think about how you were able to really find a way to really love the game. How did that end up turning into you going into the coaching world and seeing how you could use that to positively impact a player's life?
It was not really by design. It was just, I selfishly was chasing the opportunity to do more things I enjoyed. And that was really the only motivation. Was I wanted to do things that I liked doing. And so I thought, well, I can't really be a player anymore. I want to stay around the game because I like the game. So I'm not going to be a referee because everybody hates referees. Coaching is about the only option for me. And so started to work with younger players. I was smart enough to say, I'm just going to start to work with 11-year-olds. And then if I can work with 11-year-olds and help them get better, then I'll get 14-year-olds. And if I can help 14-year-olds and help them get better, then I'll get 17-year-olds. And so I really worked my way up, and all the while just trying to figure out, what do I enjoy doing? And I did one season as like an 11-year-old coach and a head coach, and just found I liked it. It was fun. But at the same time, I was doing more shooting work, shooting instruction. And that's what I found I really enjoyed. And so I focused more on being an individual skills trainer back before even a skills trainer was a thing. And I had a moment where I kind of thought, am I going to do shooting specific or be a generalist where I do a whole bunch of everything? And I found I didn't like the other aspects of the game as much. So just selfishly, I wanted to do more of the stuff that I really liked doing. And I found that the better I got at it, the more there was a need for it anyways. And so my passion filled a need. And I think that's where you end up in a perfect scenario.
Of course, and the need for shooting has only grown exponentially since you started with the current three-point revolution that we're seeing happen in the NBA. And obviously, we have to touch on the awesome jerseys behind you with all the amazing players you've worked with. The one that really stuck out to me was when I saw your work with Tristan Thompson and how you completely changed the percentages in his shooting and in his game. Can you talk about that a little bit and what you kind of first saw in Tristan and what happened there?
I was hired by the Cavaliers to come in because they had made the decision that Tristan needed to switch his dominant shooting hand. And so he's the first player in NBA history that switched from either left-handed to right-handed, in his case, or right to left. And the reason that decision was made is Tristan is exceptionally ambidextrous. He even said to me at one point, I don't know which hand is more comfortable for different things. Whereas somebody like myself and probably the bulk of people out there, it's very obvious to us which is more comfortable. It wasn't obvious at all to him. So he grew up shooting left-handed because a coach when he was 11 told him, hey, write with your left hand, shoot with your left hand. Like, don't try and master both, just pick one. And what I've learned in the meantime is that maybe the question should have been, which hand would you throw a baseball with or a football? Like, what's a macro activity that you do as opposed to a micro activity of writing? And so the Cavaliers made the decision that they think he's actually right-handed, but he's shooting the ball left-handed. And once they convinced him, then he said, well, how are we going to go about improving this? And they said, well, hire a shooting coach. And that's where I came into the picture. So the decision was already made, but then over the next year, we worked to kind of relearn, or I guess not even relearn, just learn how to get some of these details right with his right hand. And I'm proud to say that in that year, even though he had no experience with that hand, the year that he spent with me was his highest free throw percentage that he's had even since that time. Even though he's got more experience, he still hasn't matched the percentages that we got to that year.
That's awesome. And it's crazy to think about how someone, because to most people, it's so obvious, which is whether you're dominant with your right or your left hand, to have that kind of question mark and then to make it to the NBA shooting in the wrong way is absurd. It's crazy that could happen. And then finally he's able to get it right and see those jumps, which is great.
And it's just this testament, like, how do you get to the NBA when you don't even know which hand to be shooting with? Being 6'10" and outrageously athletic and a willing rebounder and defender is his elite skill set. And so that's how we got there. And then it's now figuring out, okay, how do I extend this career and be able to offer more to a team by adding other skill sets?
Oh, of course. That's just really a shot for him is icing on the cake with all the other skills he has with rebounding and defending. And then obviously there's a bunch of other players on your wall who also, I mean, I think Aaron Gordon fits that mold perfectly of being super athletic, a willing rebounder, someone that has all those physical tools, but at the beginning of his career wasn't able to put it together shooting the ball. What did you kind of see with Aaron?
Aaron came out of college. He was a 42% free throw shooter in his 1 year in college, and drafted by the Magic. And I was hired immediately after the draft, knowing that they had just drafted Aaron and Elfrid Payton, who were weaker shooters. And so Aaron was the priority for that first year, was just trying to identify the reasons why he was inconsistent. And within about 10 shots in the first day that we were in the gym, we identified that he held the ball wrong. He gripped the basketball like he was trying to palm it. So his shooting hand thumb was too wide and too much on the front of the basketball, and it was impacting the way the ball came off of his hand. And so we isolated that skill, learned to grip the ball differently and get comfortable with gripping the ball differently, and then applied that new isolated skill into progressively more difficult situations as he got better at it.
That's incredible to think about as to how a small change like that could really change a player's game. And it's awesome to see where he's gone from there. And then can you also talk to us maybe a couple of the other players on your wall, maybe another story that really stuck out to you as it's incredible that someone was able to make such a small change and see such big results?
Yeah, the other guy that kind of stands out, and I try and avoid talking about my players too much because I don't want to take credit for the work that ultimately they've done. Like, I've given guidance, but I haven't done the work. They did. And so it's ultimately them that deserves the credit. But the guy that I'm really most proud of, or not most proud of, I'm proud of all my players, but he has a unique story, was Dwyane Dedmond, who when I met him in Orlando was a mid-50% free throw shooter, and a guy that quite honestly we didn't want shooting the ball because he didn't shoot it well. And I saw something in him that I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of why he was missing the shots that he was missing. And we reworked his set point from back over top of his head to more in front of his forehead. and getting the energy working for him rather than against him a little bit better. And the reason I'm really proud of Dwyane is at the beginning of an off season, we really only had about 3 or 4 days together. And so I spent that time teaching him why this change would result in some positive changes in his results, and then showing him about 3 different drills that he could do to isolate and layer that habit and learn to build the habit. And then the rest of that summer, I was following Alfred Payton around. And so all Dwyane and I could do was share video back and forth. We're in different cities at different times. And at the beginning of that off season, at the end of those 3 or 4 days where we got in a gym together, I'll be honest, I kind of thought, this guy, he has all the potential in the world, but he's probably not going to do this work. And about a month later, he sent me a video update, and I saw, he's actually working on this. He's actually trying. And then every couple of weeks, we would check in with more video, and I'd give him little add-ons to the drills to try and build what he was doing. And he came into training camp where I thought it was going to be, that's when we'd actually have to restart. He had already not finished the process, but made amazing progress for 3 or 4 months and really had a new shot. And in that next year, he went from 53% from the free throw line to 75, and then into the 80s, and then developed some range just because of that change to the set point and getting that energy working for him. And ultimately, he did it by himself, which is so exciting.
Of course, it's great to think about how much hard work could really help get those results, and to think about a player obviously utilizing some of the tips, but if they don't put the work in, no results are going to come. And obviously, Dwyane had to do that to see what came out of that. So we spoke a lot about players that you kind of found that had a lot of issues with their jump shot. When you first got into the league with the Suns, you had a guy like Steve Nash, who's one of the greatest shooters of all time. What was it like learning from him and learning from each other, kind of, in terms of just how to get the best results?
Well, I didn't work with Steve. He was a player on the team for sure, and somebody that I was very interested in watching, but I was hired to work with a player named Louis Hobinson. And so that was my task. I was charged with just Lou was my focus. But then, especially as a Canadian, and Steve Nash being Canadian, all eyes were on him when he had a free opportunity to end up being one of the best shooters that's ever lived. Like, I learned more from him than I didn't teach the guy anything. We never spoke where I was trying to teach him. If anything, I was trying to gather information from him that might be able to help some of the other players that I'd be working with throughout my career. So it was just amazing to see the level of detail that he attacked everything with, the level of precision that he expected from himself. And when you see that, it's no surprise that he becomes a great shooter. And simple little things like doing plyometrics. The Suns would put a bunch of ladders down on the plyometric ladders down on the floor and do plyometric series through that. And there were bigger, less athletic players that would be very deliberate and very slow through the ladders. And then you'd see somebody like Grant Hill, who was very agile and quick and athletic and excelled at these things. And then Steve Nash would be on another level. And you don't necessarily think of Steve Nash as like fast or athletic in that way, but he's just so precise in his movement. He never kicked the ladder. Foot was always right in the middle of the square, and just little tiny details like that, that he held himself accountable. So fast, so precise. And then you say, well, it's no surprise now that this guy was great at a precise skill set that you have to execute quickly.
Of course, and those little details are what made him quick, even though most fans kind of just seeing it wouldn't really think of him as the guy that would dunk on someone. But he is so quick, and that's how you end up breaking all those assist records, which is pretty awesome to think about. So Coach, what's kind of that dynamic like when you're working with a team? Are you kind of really focused on one player that they bring you in for, or is it a whole team thing?
It can be really any dynamic that the team wants. And what I try and recommend is my skill set fits the weaker shooters. So I don't offer a tremendous amount of value to guys that are already great shooters, but I want to spend as much time with the guys that, if they could develop or improve a jump shot, would really lead to some significant results and improvement. And so I've been hired to, on a couple of different occasions, to work with one specific player, and then teams will say, hey, if an organic relationship develops, if a player approaches you, by all means, help them. But in a lot of cases, the staffs are so big in the NBA that if one coach can impact one player with one skill, that's tremendous value. And I think I offer that kind of skill in a way that a lot of other coaches might not. They're better at the general situational skills, even regarding shooting, whereas I think I excel at the habitual side and learning to rework a muscle pattern that can still be of value to a staff.
Well, that's some great insight on the dynamic that goes around within a team and within a coaching staff. So thank you for that. Off that note, on what you've been done for NBA teams in the past, can you tell us a little bit about the love of the game and what that's done for you?
Yeah, the love of the game is my company that I use to run youth camps. And really, that was my biggest goal when I started off as a shooting coach. Was the biggest dream that I would allow myself to dream was that I wanted to do a monthly shooting camp in the north end of my city and one in the south end of my city. And if I could do that, then I'd feel like I really made it. And once I got to that level, then it was my mentor did a great job of just keeping me in check and saying, okay, now how do you make your business a little bit bigger? What's the next step? And the next step for me was, okay, instead of working with youth players, working with college and university players. And then once I was able to do that, then I had enough of a name around my area that I could go and do clinics in other cities and other towns. And then after a few years working with the university team, I didn't even realize it, but the NBA became a possibility. And once I got the NBA job, now I was able to do clinics across Canada and then into the United States and now around the world. And so I'm able to take these stories and these moments and these teaching points of things that guys like Aaron and Tristan and Bismack and Dwyane and Alfred have worked on to improve and show youth players how they can do the same thing. And so I travel now the world. I've done clinics in Australia and heading over into Europe this in 2021 to just work with youth players, and they're a lot of fun, and it's just really fun to get the emails a couple of weeks later from parents just saying, Bobby said he learned more in those 6 hours about shooting than he had in an entire year before that. So that's really gratifying and something that I love doing.
Well, of course, it must be so rewarding to hear that kind of feedback from parents and to see all these young players develop in that camp and in that love for and kind of chasing their own love for the game at the love for the game, which is really cool. Off that note, I also saw your newsletter and how you've been kind of promoting that a lot. I would imagine the pandemic can you kind of talk about how that's shifted, whether it's the focus of the love for the game and how you're getting that message out?
Yeah, all of a sudden traveling became really difficult in 2020, and a large part of my business is based on travel. So that was taken away, and then it's figuring how to pivot. And fortunately, I had started my newsletter, a free newsletter where I try and share teaching points about shooting mechanics. I had started that probably about 2 years before, probably in about 2018 or so. And it's just gone through a bunch of different evolutions as I learn what people want to learn from me, and I learn better how to teach through email and video. And then the pandemic hits, and you're really forced into that world, which has been a blessing in disguise. So I use my newsletter to teach and promote different resources that I have to help players, coaches, parents, become better shooters. And one of the things I've started just in the last couple of months is my inner circle, where I give access to all my drills in video form, my drills database. I give members of my inner circle access to all those drills, and then a phone number that they can text message me through. And so every day, players in my inner circle will be sending me video of their shot, doing drills that I'm prescribing to them. And then I'll say, okay, now be careful when you're gripping the basketball. Just be aware of how that thumb is positioned. or make sure your guide hand's more on the side of the ball so that it's not impacting, try and get the ball, giving them specific feedback so that I'm acting the same way I did with Dwyane Dedmond, where I'm coaching them specifically, not theoretically. We're just doing it through video and sometimes around the world. I've got clients in Australia and in Europe, and it's been really fun to interact every morning. I wake up and answer the text messages and share video back and forth and direct them. And it's been really enjoyable to have that outlet.
Of course, it's awesome to think about how, even though your travel's been restricted, you've in a way still been able to use the internet to your advantage and take the love for the game global and impact people from all over the country that kind of would have been very hard for you to do in person and by plane. So that's great.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's doesn't beat being in the gym, but it's a good substitute for now.
Now, just kind of to think of a fun topic with the NBA season right around the corner. Who are some guys that you really think are going to make a big jump shooting wise that you kind of have seen? Because it can be misleading seeing on Instagram guys working on their shot and everyone thinks that they're getting a lot much better. Who do you think might take a really big step shooting wise?
To be honest, even when I'm working with a player, I don't worry about that stuff. You're taking an educated guess at that point who's going to make a significant improvement. And I try and really teach my players, don't get hung up on what might happen. Stay focused on what we're doing now that will pay off. We don't know when, and we don't know how much. So I try and avoid the predictions and just instead focus on the work that is necessary to get results.
And can you kind of give our listeners an idea of what the best way is to get in touch and see what you're doing, stay up to date with everything going out, the love for the game, and where they can learn more about you?
The best ways are through social media. CoachDaveLove.com. Instagram and Twitter are the two that I'm most involved with. And then through my newsletter, you can go to CoachDaveLove.com and sign up for my newsletter. If you reply to an email, it comes to me personally, and I do my best to reply to everybody that sends me an email. So if you're interested in hosting a clinic down the road for your high school program or your youth association, that's where you can get a hold of me or send me a DM through social media, and I can direct you towards the way that I might be able to help.
That's a great idea. And honestly, with both the program that I coach with the high school team and stuff like that, I did give me a few ideas on how we might be able to hopefully speak again in the future. So Coach Dave, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I really appreciate your insights on shooting and thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun and can't wait till the next time we talk as well.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.